Welcome to the Man with No Name podcast. I'm your host, the Man with No Name. I'm no single man, yet I'm every person. I'm you, exploring the highs and lows, the shared journey of parenthood, marriage, spiritual healing, and personal growth. Thanks for joining me. Becoming aligned, Noelle Farr's journey beyond the leash. Welcome back to the Man with No Name podcast. Today marks a special milestone for the show. For the first time ever, we're bringing you a video episode. And that shift matters because when you see someone's eyes as they tell their story, when you feel the energy between two people talking about something real, something human, it lands deeper. So if you're listening on audio, I'd invite you to check out the video version on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you follow us. My guest today is Noelle Farr, known to many as the trainer and creator behind Aligned Canine. But this episode isn't about dog training, at least not in the way that you're thinking. It's about the person behind the brand. The human story, the quiet battles, the formative wounds, the search for truth in a growing call towards healing. This conversation is the first of a two-part arc. Noelle is about to embark on a guided psychedelic medicine journey led by my dear friend and facilitator, Lena. In this episode, we explore the why she's answering this call, what patterns she's ready to break, what she hopes to uncover, and how her entire life, from being the youngest of 8 in a fundamentalist church to finding herself through animals and intuition, has been leading to this moment. Whether you're curious about plant medicine, working through your own healing, or just here to hear a raw human story, you're in the right place. If something in this episode resonates, take a second to subscribe, follow the podcast, and share it with someone who needs it. Now, let's get into it. So Noelle Farr, welcome to the show. Welcome to this episode of the Man with No Name podcast. Just want to give everybody a brief overview in terms of who you are, and we can talk about why you're here as well. But you are a very accomplished dog trainer. You own and operate Aligned Canine, which is found on social media, Instagram, TikTok, under Aligned Canine, and also alignedcanine.com, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and we can talk a little bit more about that. That has to do with the background in terms of why you're here. But I really want to kind of pull out the fact that you're here, you're a dog training professional, but we're not talking necessarily about that. You and I met at a recent conference about consciousness, and just through what we would normally call coincidences, it's really synchronicities. We met, I recognize you having working dogs myself, as to who you were, but also knew that we have personal friends in common too, oddly enough. And one of those personal friends went through some plant medicine psychedelic work with my friend Lena, who you're not going to see later this month. And everything just kind of worked out. And now you're here to talk about your story, your background. And this part is part 1 of 2 episodes, where this one is kind of sets up the story and your intentions and your background, what's leading you towards plant medicine journeys. And then part 2 will be after, right? Where we're going to talk to you and get some insight on some of your learnings, how they compare to your expectations that we're going to talk about today, and anything else that comes to mind. So with that said, welcome again.
Thank you. Thanks.
And let's get into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and maybe your upbringing, environment, what brought you here, your family structure, etc. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited. This is my first official podcast, and like I said earlier, I couldn't imagine having a more appropriate one for all the things that are me, really. So I grew up in a family of 8 as number 8, and I was part of a Christian non-denominational church that was later basically labeled as a cult for a lot of the kind of typical reasons. I left that church before all those things really started coming out publicly and they started going through lawsuits and all that. But yeah, my upbringing was definitely very unique, I think, in a lot of ways. My family, altogether, my family was phenomenal. Very loving, very open. We all, to this day, still talk to each other and regularly check up on each other. That being said, there were, of course, specific things in my upbringing that I think just contributed to how I think, what I'm processing now, what I'm going through now, and kind of culminating to why I want to go through all of this. So, yeah, my dad had hepatitis C. He'd had it, I think, before I was even born. And that kind of led to his being a little bit more mentally absent. He did the best he could, but he was definitely more mentally absent. And we went through financial struggles, also understandable with 8 children. Also on the East Coast as well. I came out here about 10 years ago. But yeah, all those pieces, while nothing super big and obvious happened during that time, in terms of like, oh, this was a traumatic event, a lot of those pieces have been coming up for me over the past couple years, where I'm realizing how much just all of those things combine together to form my belief structure and system. And so, yeah, a big reason why I'm going through all this now is because I'm working on kind of disintegrating all these pieces and reassembling who I want to be.
Can you go a little bit deeper, a little bit more specific on some of the internal narratives and stories that your upbringing and your environment have been planting in your head, since your childhood and even into now? So you've alluded to some factors. I'd love to hear specifically what are those voices telling you?
So one of the things when I was younger, I had trouble in school, specifically with things like math in particular. And the teachers would think that I was basically being lazy and not working, and I would be quite literally doing the opposite, spending huge amounts of time on trying to understand something. And they found out that they did these specific studies, and they got me qualified for a 504 plan with the label of having a processing disorder, meaning it basically would take me longer to be able to understand what most people would be able to understand relatively quickly. So with that label, I think I kind of took that to heart, because how can you not, as a kid, you have a disorder, and a processing disorder specifically led me to think that I was slow. And each time that I would go to try to learn something new, I would often have this feeling of extreme anxiousness, this feeling of I need to, I'd be taking a test. I need to hurry up and figure out this problem so I can get to the next problem so that I can finish the test, so I can, get good grades or whatever it is. And I would be stuck in this feeling of basically being trapped, of feeling kind of suffocated, panicking. My heart would be beating really hard. And again, this mentality of I have to get out of this situation. I can't get out of this situation. I don't know how to get out of the situation. And then back to, but I have to get out of this situation. And that specific feeling had followed me to adulthood. And it wasn't until actually very recently that I was able to pinpoint specifically across multiple different situations where I would be kind of breaking down. I'm like, why am I freaking out so bad about this, like a dog whining or something like that? And this feeling is like I'm going to die. And again, the past couple of months since I've decided to do this, I was able to realize and ask the question, well, what is the common theme across these situations? What is the feeling behind it? And I was kind of able to pinpoint that specific feeling and connect back to childhood in several different situations.
That's very insightful in terms of the stimuli and sort of narrative that you were feeling from your circumstances and how it started in childhood and how it's obviously still carries with you into adulthood. So I'm hearing that you experienced a lot of internal feelings, emotions, and voices. How would you say that shaped how you looked at yourself?
That's a good question. I think that I looked at myself, and still do to a degree, as kind of a broken, being a broken person, something that is not good enough, something that's not, something that needs fixing. So that I think that combined with the narrative that we were fed at the church was, you have to basically live this perfect life and never do anything, a lot of particular things that are just very human. And I became a very guilty and shameful person over like everything. And I was able to, through the years, I've been unpacking a lot of this, and I've been working on a lot of this, and I've been able to let go a lot of it. But that particular feeling, I've seen even almost my whole family go through it. And one of the pieces, you know how each of us kind of reverts to a specific trauma response. One of the pieces that had come up for me is that my instinctive trauma response is the appeasement or the fawner. So if somebody is upset or whatever it is, I'm trying to fix the situation and make them feel better at the expense of not showing anything with myself. And again, through the past 5-ish years in particular, I have moved from that as my instinctive trauma response. And I think that will always be my instinctive one. But I moved from that one to the freeze response to the flight response. And I then moved hardcore into the fight response the past 2-3 years, which has been a journey in of itself, because I started getting very curious about anger, because again, that was something that was a big no-no in the church. Do not be angry. You just forgive everybody all the time, which, there's a lot of validity in that, but that was at the expense of myself, and all of that energy of basically ignoring myself and disowning myself and just trying to help everybody started to really erupt when I was leaning into the anger, and it came out very messy oftentimes. But I'm realizing that's a tool. Like, anger is a very useful thing. But that feeling, all those things throughout the years, the energy isn't created or destroyed. It just, it is. And so I was pushing it down, and it's like I use the analogy all the time as like a tea kettle. It was just like boiling to the point of boiling, and eventually it's going to erupt. So that steam, that energy has been coming out slowly, and it's not like a one and done kind of situation. As much as I want it to be, it's not like that. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure. I still don't have all the pieces, and I don't really think I will until the day I die, but that's been my upbringing up until now.
You won't, but that is the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the journey, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's helpful to know. And I think you mentioned the tool for all of this. I think a greater tool beyond anger and putting energy somewhere else in a different form is awareness.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that you've demonstrated, you told the story in the past 5 years, fight, flight, freeze, right? And your awareness was starting to wake up 5 years ago, and it's still going on today.
Yep.
So awareness is one thing, but then feeling the shift to heal, to do something about it. Your mindfulness and your awareness had like that tea kettle grew and grew and grew, and now it's shifting to where you're like, I want to do something about this. I want to heal. When did that shift happen? Was it an acute event where you just woke up one day and you said, we talk about the dark night of the soul, Eckhart Tolle. Was it something that just rocked you to the core, or was it just one day it just built, and you said, I'm going to heal myself?
That's a great question. It actually applies to both my spiritual life and my work life a bit. So is it okay if I kind of do a crossover? Yeah. So I always wanted something very obvious like that to happen. I had told you actually the other day, I was like, I could feel something wasn't right within me. I wanted to heal. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to grow. But I also was like, I don't know what the thing is, because it was an accumulation of things, I think. It wasn't one big traumatic event that I can, go through and heal that. It was a lot of little subtle things. And yeah. And so about 6-ish years ago, actually, I'll summarize this. So I had basically spent my whole life becoming a teacher. I was an interpreter for the deaf and hard of hearing for a little while, basically a teacher's aide. I worked at a whole bunch of different schools. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and then I got my master's in special education. And it was quite literally, I was finishing up my master's, and I had a job at the best school that I've ever had in my entire life out here. It was a private/public school for moderate to severe special needs kids. Phenomenal teachers, phenomenal humans. And I was finishing up my degree, I had my internship there. I was also getting paid there, and they were looking to hire new teachers and everything. And I'd been there for, I don't know, a year, couple months, something like that. And there was a teacher that I worked underneath, and she was just the most lovely, wonderful human who just loves her life and loves her job. And there was a student who was having what we call an escalation, and he was on the ground, he was screaming and kicking and doing all the things, and people were around him making sure he wasn't hurting himself or other people. And for each student, we would have a de-escalation plan, so specific things that the child could do to start to de-escalate. And nothing they were doing was working. And this particular teacher looks at another teacher, and I just remember this moment like a snapshot in my memory. And she looks at this other teacher with this like gleam in her eye, like just so thrilled. And she was like, I guess we have to come up with another de-escalation plan. And she wasn't excited that the student was freaking out. She was just excited at the thought of doing something to help the student. And she was so thrilled and so passionate about doing it. And in that moment, when I saw her energy and her excitement, my heart just sank, because I realized that I would never have that for this particular job. And then right around that time, I didn't know what that meant. I had taken out student loans. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just don't want to do this. But right around that time, I actually had my first and second ever emotional breakdowns at that job, at any job ever, where I just started crying, and I was like freaking out. I couldn't stop crying. And I was like, I don't know what's going on.
What prompted those?
I think it was a good question. I think that was a buildup of that feeling inside me where I was realizing this was not what I was supposed to do. But again, I couldn't see my way out of it. I couldn't visualize what I could do, because I'd spent my entire life specifically working towards this thing, and again going into debt and having student loans, and I'm like, I have no savings at the time. I had no savings, and I didn't know what I was going to do. All that I knew was my heart was not in it, and I was kind of devastated, for lack of a better term. But yeah, it was that particular moment that I was like, okay, I can't do this. I did try for one other teaching job online for a couple months right after that, and I it solidified everything for me. It was the worst job I'd ever had. It was so hard. And I was like, you know what? It just is what it is. That was 2019, and that's spring. And I was like, it is what it is. I was like, I know the one particular thing that I like is animals, and I know I like, behavior. And I had no idea what that looked like. Dog training wasn't even, I didn't even know about dog. I didn't even know that existed. And so I started applying for, a whole bunch of minimum wage jobs with dogs, and kept getting turned down because I didn't have experience with it. They were like, you're a teacher, what are you doing? Turned down so many times, but all of those situations, including one where I thought it was like the epitome, working for San Diego Humane Society as a Humane Society officer. I was like, that's going to be the best job ever. I worked really hard to pass their test that I had to take twice, and I still got turned down. And I was pretty upset, but I ended up I got a job as a dog walker. That's a whole other story we can get into later, but as a dog walker, and then I ended up kept getting asked about training and everything. And then I started thinking about that, and we'll get into that later, I'm sure. But it was a lot of things that kind of accumulated, and so the job was one of the things that led to that shift. And once I started following this shift in my job, basically in my life, and I followed that voice, quite literally, almost as soon as I actually started to get into training, doors started opening for me, like things that I never could have visualized or imagined ever. When I started my own business and I just jumped into it, it's the same thing. I never imagined my social media is taking off, and they just exploded like 3 months after I started my business, or 2 or 3 months after I started my business. So I went through that whole process where I got to experience what I would call magic, like, for lack of a better term. It was just I could never have perceived it until I went through it. And I just felt this constant state of gratitude after having gone through that very challenging time where I gave up everything that I'd ever known to do something that I wanted to do, even though I didn't know how to do it. And so I went through that, and since that time, it was wonderful, and then it started kind of going down again. So I'm in this particular stage right now where I know that it's not something that I'm going to stay in. I know that there is something on the other side or through this experience that's going to be something I can't even envision right now. But
when you say going down again, are you talking about like an inner voice, like an inner feeling that you have unresolved business? Or was it related to everything that you felt growing up despite the success you've had in adulthood? Or was it something new that spawned since you have found success?
I think it's kind of both of the things for me. There's just a lot of crossovers, as you can kind of hear in this story. So my work is a very direct, in front of me, tangible example. But even within my work, there are things that come up that are connected to my past that I'm aware of or have been made aware of. So when I say down again, it feels more like a middle more than anything. It feels like I'm pretty good in everything with my business. I'm good with clients, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I'm not finding the same amount of joy that I was finding before. And I'm feeling that voice inside, that intuition is saying there's more than just this. So it's a little bit hard to put into words, but again, because of what I've gone through since starting my business, I know that almost consistent feeling of gratitude and just waking up with energy and just being so excited to work with people. I know that feeling, that state of being is possible, and not just possible, but I think that that is a state of being that we're meant to be in. But it's not typically going to be the way I think that most people try to attain it. So what I'm trying to say is, and I'll probably repeat myself several times, but I think it's specifically by sitting in this uncomfortable kind of feeling that I'm having now and trying to, working to allowing that feeling to come up and bring me to whatever moments in my past that are similar that I have yet to learn from, so that I can, I think, unblock or release that stored energy that I maybe haven't been aware of up until this point. Because I think that the more we clear, the more we're then able to become. Because if we're a super full, cup or vessel, and we're full of all of our crap, then there's no room for anything else to go inside. Nothing good. It just continues to get, pressurized. So if we're able to release all that stuff, that those beliefs that we had, those belief systems as children or as teenagers or adults, whatever, that allows more space for. It's not so much something to be put in, but it's an awareness of who we already are, which I think is a feeling of peace and a feeling of bliss and love and joy. That's just what I think and I believe, but I can't prove it. But
I'm tracking with what you're saying.
Yep.
I'm tracking with what you're saying. You're talking about, so to be clear, especially for people listening, this weight, I don't want to say the word burden, but this weight that you've been feeling, it comes from a place of feeling like there's more room to grow. It's almost like incomplete. It is not coming from a place of traumatic energy and traumatic history weighing you down, right? It's kind of like you're feeling like you're meant for more. You found a little bit of the path, and you're trying to find the next level.
I think so. I think that for me, I say quotations trauma is a little bit more, not necessarily like was physically abused or anything like that, something added to it. I think it was a little bit more of kind of like an absence. So like I felt pretty alone for a lot of my, like when I was a teenager and everything, because most of my siblings had, grown up and moved away, and my friends had moved away. And learning how to recognize that feeling of, I think, isolation at that time, and realizing what that means now is something that I need to kind of give to myself by being that for myself, in conjunction with people around me. It's a little bit hard to explain in words, but it's kind of a feeling. So it doesn't really feel like trauma per se. Yeah. It just feels like something not quite right. And it's not that I am, want to go and blame any one person or anything like that. I'm sure there's lots of contributing factors, but it's okay, well, I am the master of my own destiny. Like I have the ability to choose my life. So if I'm feeling an absence, how can I go and be that for myself? And once that feeling of kind of centeredness and connection is a little bit more full, I guess, then anything that I'm creating is coming from that state, as opposed to I'm feeling, traumatized or upset or whatever, and then anything I'm doing is coming from that state. So it's a bit of a process that I'm not always aware of, but it's kind of how I view it.
It makes sense. So what I'm hearing is you're experiencing the beginning stages of an awakening of sorts, where your consciousness, it started with the mindfulness 5 years ago, understanding the different emotions as coping mechanisms and now recognizing it for what it is. And now you're here today on the cusp of true sort of an awakening of the next step. You've also mentioned that you're not exactly running away from your past. You're not running away from anything super traumatic, but you're being called towards something. What exactly is that feeling that you're being called towards, and how does it relate to, say, what we're talking about here, plant medicine, Lena, you and I meeting, etc.? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. It feels like there's something just more than what the world or society or people present. That feeling that I was referring to earlier, the emptying of the vessel to realize who and what we already are. Those specific feelings of peace and joy and love and bliss, I think those are our natural states that we kind of forget over our life. And we put up blinders throughout our life from our own fears. And so rediscovering who and what we already are, I think is a big piece of all of this. Part of the reason why I was drawn specifically to DMT was actually originally Dr. Joe Dispenza, which we've also discussed in the past, and I'm so grateful to that guy. It's just amazing because it just led me down this incredible path where, when I first started to listen to him and see things from him, I think there were just quotes in the beginning, I felt this like it was like an ignition, like inside it felt like so connected and so true and real, like no hesitation. I recognized truth, I guess, for lack of a better term, and it just drew me. And he talks about the how we specifically actually have DMT in our systems, but our systems break everything down very quickly. But he helped me to understand, and I really started kind of deep diving into everything, how DMT, something like DMT or mushrooms or something like that, can actually help us to develop new neurological pathways within our brain. And in so doing, it makes things a little bit potentially easier for us to see things in a different way. So I am very much about trying to understand all perspectives of everything in life. And so I was just very drawn to it. Actually, it was during COVID, I had this almost overwhelming, like if I had had access to DMT, I would have done it, absolutely no hesitation. But I didn't have access to it or anything at the time. But that being said, since that time, I had access over the past 3-ish years, and I tried it on 2 separate occasions, and neither time worked for me. So, which is interesting. But I took that to mean that the timing wasn't quite right. So anyways, when I met you, that day we quite literally started talking about that within 5 minutes of our conversation. And you were telling me about Lena, and you were explaining the setup and the situation. I was like, I want that right now. Like, give that is what I need. So it was just in alignment with that truth. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. scared, but I'm looking forward to it.
The fear is natural. And for people listening, I've talked about this on the podcast several times, but for anybody listening to this for the first time saying, what exactly are they talking about? Just for a little bit of clarity, plant medicines such as psilocybin, mushrooms, DMT, and 5-MeO DMT, and even other sacraments that they call, such as ayahuasca, ibogaine. A lot of it is not, well, all of it, none of it is something that you just kind of, pop in your garage and just hope for the best, right? And there needs to be setting, intention. A lot of this needs a tremendous amount of respect and reverence for it, both for its tradition, its history, but as well as for its power to unlock what you and I are talking about and what we look for, which is an awakening and broadening of the consciousness. And this is not, again, something that you just do on your own. So what Lena, my friend and facilitator, who you're about to meet in person later this month, what she does is through an entire guided process of intake where you talk to her, figure out if this is the right path for you. What are you looking for? Are you just looking for a trip? If that's the case, no. You should not be working with Lena, or you should really not be working with this medicine at all. But setting the intention, being crystal clear with a couple setup calls leading up to the day of the ceremony, which is a life-changing event. I'm laughing because you have not gone through this yet, and in terms of the breakthroughs and just the blasting of consciousness, I know what you're about to go through, and I'm very happy for you. I think it's exactly what you're looking for. But then people think the journey itself of going on this plant medicine and all the stuff that you see is the end of the journey, and it's not. It's what I would call the tip of the iceberg. The rest of the iceberg is the integration of the ego and your downloads and your thoughts after that. The integration after the ceremony is probably more important than the ceremony itself, because that is an integration of who you are and who you want to be. So you're about to go through all of this. With that said, question for you is, you understand what you're getting yourself into, and that's your thinking mind. What does your intuition tell you that this medicine might, and this line of work, this healing, what does your intuition tell you that it's going to unlock for you?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. I've been thinking about that, and I can only think about that, so clearly with my thinking mind. I think that I have a little tiny bit of a flavor for it because I have done mushrooms before. Also, for all the reasons that you described, for me, it was not to just have a crazy trip. It was to do work, and I did work. And it was also, as you mentioned, that after process of integrating, because it's in the moment when you're doing this, you have such a huge awareness of the closest way that I can summarize this is kind of, it's a map of everything, of consciousness, but it's tailored for each individual, I think. And that's very, very broad way of putting it. But in the moment, you're very aware. You get downloads, you get information that you couldn't possibly know. But when they're happening, you have this feeling of knowing. And that's a very difficult thing to describe unless you've gone through it. But you just know that it is truth. You know that. And so when I sit here and I think about, well, what is it going to be like for me to go through, my automatic mind, my ego, has these lists of, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is what I want. I want it's going to be an explosion. I'm going to be wonderful and amazing, and everything's going to be perfect afterwards. And I know that's not going to be the case. I hope that it's going to be the case, but I know that's not going to be the case. And that's fine. So I think that I'm currently dancing on this line a little bit of my logical mind has expectations, especially in terms of what I want my intentions and what I would like, things, how I would like things to be. But it's also very much a process that I've learned actually, and also when I started my business of kind of visualizing and feeling the things that how I want to be, not the things that are just how I want to be. There could be things in my life, but how I want to be, and fueling that with intention and energy, and then letting it go. And that's the hard part for the logical mind, but completely letting it go. So I think since it's coming up in about 3 weeks, I'm still kind of clarifying specific things because I really want things to be very, very clear in terms of my overall intention. So I think I'm honing in on that pretty well for the most part. But again, like you said, it's not just like a one and done kind of thing. It's like one day I'll be like, cool, I'm all set, I'm good. And then the next day my fears in my mind will, start going again. And so then it's okay, let's go sit with that for a little while. Okay, let's go release that and, all that stuff. So that being said, I did want to ask you a quick question because I know that you've done this before. And I think you said you did it a couple of times. I'm curious. So in terms of the first time that you did this, I would imagine your intentions now doing it again and again are a little bit different. So could you talk a little bit on how that original intention was for you the first time that you did this, and then why you chose to go and do it again? Because I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So for me, the first time I did it, it was a situation where I was approaching a period of my life where I still am a new dad, with a 6 and 4 year old, but I was new, where I had, I think, like a 2-year-old and less than 2-year-old, right? And working through a lot of the trauma and generational trauma that I've been subjected to. And I looked at the future, and there's an inside voice telling me that despite all the traditional therapy that you've done, you still have issues. And you are on a collision course with destiny. And your destiny is to repeat history. Mm-hmm. It is going to be that you're going to be estranged from your kids. You're going to be the same father that you did not want to have as your own. And there's nothing you can do about it. And there was a voice in my head that said, I would rather die than let that happen. And it's funny because the understanding of DMT, some people believe that DMT, it is endogenous. It's in your brain. It's secreted theoretically when you dream at night and also when you die. That causes these visions of dreaming and hallucinations and whatnot. But when you die, it's a sudden release of all the DMT, which is, some people believe, the white light, the afterlife sort of a post-life review and crossing over and everything. So around that time, I learned about the benefits of psychedelic medicine or plant medicine and DMT, 5-Meo DMT. And through a bunch of synchronicities, and I talked about this in one of my episodes, so I won't rehash it here, but I ended up getting in touch with Lena. And I went into the first ceremony thinking that this generational trauma and everything that I carried with me was like a cancer. So how do you treat cancer? Chemotherapy, radiation. You bring the body to the brink of death and you come back without it. You say, hey, mother effer, you want to stay with me? Let's see if you can hang on. Let's go. So I treated that destiny that I thought I was headed towards like a cancer. And I treated the experience of 5-Meo DMT essentially like, I'm going to die and I'm going to come back changed without you. So that was my intention of doing this the first time. And then the second time was a part of it further healing with a different intention of integrating ego. And also, this is now going to my fourth day specifically Journey for 5-MeO DMT. And the intention is similar, where coming out of the first few sessions, I came out with like this feeling of, oh my God, I'm enlightened, and I'm this enlightened conscious being. And then I would lay on my horn and flip somebody off in traffic. A few days later going, what is that?
You were up in LA, right?
Yeah. But I'm like, what kind of fraud are you? That's what I was telling myself. So all these voices started happening, and then this awareness with these new tools that I had. I said, hey, whoa. This is consciousness. This is mindfulness. Like, you are not this angry person, and you also are not at the same time supposed to chastise yourself and get down at yourself for being this unenlightened person. First of all, you're not.
Yeah.
No matter what, but you're a work in progress. And dealing with all of this and learning from Lena, it's not that you want to kill the ego, even though you do experience what they call ego death. And that all in itself is the experience of stripping away of who you are, so you're pure consciousness, right? And it feels like death because your ego tells you, hey, you're dying, because your ego has a self-preservation mechanism that will do everything it can in its power for you to maintain the same default mode network and the same thought processes to keep you operating the way you are, because it's a safe spot.
Yep.
And when you're operating outside of that safety, the ego says, hey, be afraid. You don't want to do this. This is scary. So that fear that you feel is normal. That's just ego. Yeah. But I realized heading into the first couple sessions that, to me, I was like, let's kill the ego. Let's destroy this and come out of this. And when I was so disappointed when the anger was still there. But now I'm realizing it's not about killing the ego. Yeah. It's about integrating it. It's about taking the learnings that you have and the downloads that you have and the insights that you have and telling a different story, but also making room for yourself, saying, hey, I get that you're angry. I get that you don't feel enough. I get that you want better for yourself and that you're frustrated. But remember, that's not all it is. So it's having that internal dialogue and integrating with your ego, which is why it's time for me to go back, because it's been a while. It's been over a year since my last journey. And as you can tell, with time in life, and as Lena says it, we are not afforded the opportunity to meditate in a cave in Tibet for 10 hours a day and then have our feet washed and go to bed and do it all over again for 40 years. So, the traffic, the TPS reports, to quote Office Space, like all the BS that I deal with on my day job, it chips away at all of this mindfulness over time. And it's time for me to have a sort of, upkeep of sorts.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, upkeep is probably a poor choice of words for, blasting your ego into smithereens and facing total annihilation of who you are and coming back saying, hey, dummy, all the stuff you're worried about, it's nothing. It's now nothing. But it's hard for me to see the forest through the trees right now because it's been so long. Yeah. So that's why I'm going back.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I noticed similar with mushrooms as well. Like, after I've been through an experience, I'm like, wow, it's just amazing, and I feel super centered and all the things. But as time progresses, it kind of fades a little bit into kind of a dream-ish. You still have meaning in everything, but the maintenance that you're talking about, that makes a lot of sense. It's just like anything else. We want to be fit. We're going to continue going to the gym, or, we want to be mentally sharp. We're going to continue using our brain. So that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, that's why I meditate with psilocybin at certain doses that are a little bit above microdoses, where it forces me to stop and drop in. And then I take notes. I take copious notes. Yeah. Because some people call it voices, some people call it downloads, or merging with the source and whatever it is. But I get these downloads, and it could be just my psyche if you want to get Freudian about it. But I think it's so important to remember these reminders that are gently placed with you.
Yeah. That's part of the reason why I took so long to plan this particular thing, and I planned it out because I specifically wanted to have time afterwards to do a lot of note-taking and processing, because, again, I've had exactly what you're mentioning. I've had experiences where I'm so grateful that I took notes, even a day or so afterwards, because again, a lot of it fades, but then when you go back and you read those notes, you remember everything. At least for me, I remembered pretty much everything. And it's very valuable because if your intuition and your inner world can read some words and go back to that feeling of knowing, of that awareness, of that meaning, that really helps to continue that integration process as opposed to continuing to kind of spiral in our mind. So that makes a lot of sense.
I want to state this on this episode so it's captured, so we can go back and look at it when you come back for the second time. But I do think that we forget things often because I think the ego wants us to forget. Because it's literally that default mode network. It wants us to go back to our daily routine, to do the same thing that we do day in, day out. You wake up, you roll over, you grab the phone, you start scrolling, right? Before you do it, and then you carry on your day. It's that mindless pattern. And I think your ego makes you forget. And that's why I think it's so important to take notes and remember these things. I also think, and quote me on this, maybe one of the feelings that you'll get, and at least I get every time, when I get blasted through that light speed tunnel and then end up in this higher plane where there is absolutely nothing but everything at the same time, it's this feeling of awe where you're like, oh my God, yeah. No pun intended, right? Yeah. And then I get a secondary feeling that says, how did you forget? You've been here a million times, infinitely number of times. There's a feeling of familiarity where it's like driving down the same street that you grew up in your hometown that you don't think about, but then you're like, I remember everything. Yeah. And it's that uncanny feeling where it's just such a great reminder that, it all starts and ends in the same place. Yeah. Yeah. So as we head into this and talk about blasting off inner space, what sort of fears and anxieties do you have about your journey coming up? And what are you doing to prepare?
Yeah, so ironically, this was the hardest question for me to answer. I had to sit and think about this for a little while. I think I have a healthy dose of, anxiousness and nervousness because I've done quite a bit of research on this and I've been kind of waiting for it for years. So I've heard a lot of stories. I think the biggest thing is the fear of quite literally not having a very big, awesome, transformative experience. I think that's probably my biggest fear. I also do think that I will have moments within the trip or journey, whatever you call it, where I will feel anxious and I'll feel, scared or nervous, but just like I have done with mushrooms, I try my best to just be open in those experiences instead of trying to close and tense up and ignore and push it away because that does not work at all. And being willing to sit with that, whatever comes up, whatever the fears are that come up. I think I'm a little bit unsure and nervous about the time frame because I know that it's short in terms of our life, the actual experience of it, but I've also been told that once you're there, you can live lifetimes. So that, of course, I'm like, am I going to live lifetimes of, I don't know, dying or drowning or but that being said, I also know that, I'm not actually going to die. So, I'm going to die eventually. That's fine. But I'm not going to die in this experience. So I think kind of those things. But I do think that I'm probably a little more excited. Like that excitement feeling is definitely stronger. Might change the day of, but, ready for it.
I think I've asked you this. I can't remember. Do you meditate?
Yes. Yeah.
How long have you been doing that for?
I haven't. I'm not the greatest meditator ever. I do I don't necessarily do it every single day, but I've definitely started, I think, a lot more since Joe Dispenza. I've tried multiple different ways of meditation. The hardest, I think the hardest thing is just what everyone deals with, which is the whole chatter and just trying to just be still and go into that place of nothingness and everything, but trying to logic your way and just be like, every time a thought pops in, be like, okay, yep, that's okay. And just like, let that go. I've been doing more regularly, meditations from Muji, I think is his name. He's also on the Know Thyself podcast. And he specifically talks about on one of the episodes, he kind of goes through sort of a meditation where he's asking the host Andre all these specific questions that are at the fundamental or elemental level of who and what we are as consciousness. And it's basically just erasing everything and focusing on emptiness and nothing, and realizing the peace that is already there. I've been doing it more regularly. When, in particular, one thing I'm pretty happy about is that specifically about last year, I had a couple of really, really tough months, mentally and emotionally, and not all the time, but occasionally during those moments when I was freaking out and I'm like, I have to do all these things, and the same exact feeling that I was referring to earlier of I need to do these things and I can't and I don't know how. When I would catch myself looping, I would just stop and I'd put on a timer and I'd say, I'm going to just go sit down and think about nothing. And I'm just going to sit there for 10 minutes. I have to do all the things. I'm freaking out 10 minutes. And I would do that. And again, it would help at least a little bit in part, lead me back to that centeredness. So again, anything that I was progressing from that moment forward was coming from that place. So, yeah.
So the reason I asked if you meditate is that to answer or address your fears about not having this sort of revolutionary experience or what's going to come up, it's the same thing. That in itself is the lesson. The plant medicine will give you exactly what you need. If you hold out your hand or you have a preconceived plan in terms of what you think you should receive, don't.
Yeah.
The thing that I would recommend to you is surrender. Surrender and let what may happen. If you don't have a tremendous experience, chances are you probably did, but there is some amnesia that happens sometimes. Mm-hmm. You probably just don't remember, and that happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. I also think that whatever the plant medicine shows you, just accept it for what it is as well. It's one of those things where, like in meditation, when you try to keep a thought out of your head, you would just think more of the thought. Like if I tell you, do not think about pink elephants, that's the first thing that you think of, and you can't stop thinking about it. Yep. And there's so many parallels, right, to that. But this advice to you is something that I've given to many people. Just surrender and let go. Whatever even if you head into it. For me, I remember one time I had an intention where I was going to repeat my intention. And then probably 30 seconds into it, I was like, what was I supposed to repeat?
Yeah.
And then the question was like, wait a minute, who was I? And then I was like, wait a minute, what was I? Like I literally couldn't remember my intention. I couldn't remember if I was a human or what I was. I was literally just life. Yeah. Like pure consciousness. And then coming out of it after, I was like, oh, that's what I was supposed to get out of it. Yeah. That that's it was cool. Kind of to quote Joe Dispenza, you forget that you're somebody, something, somewhere. You become nobody, nowhere, and no thing. Yeah. And then by that standpoint, then further, you remember this, then you become everybody, everything, everywhere. Yeah. That connectedness is what you get out of it. Yeah. So awesome. Let's talk more about after this, right? And in terms of what life will look like for you. And I think right now we've talked about this, you're known for your online work. You've done a tremendous job in building your career and your presence, both online and in person. And how does integration, I talk about integration of ego, how does the integration of your career after this and your interests, what does that look like for you with Align Canine after you have your ego completely demolished and you rebuild?
Demolished, reframed.
Yeah, reframed.
Yes, yeah. I think so. That is definitely another piece. I referred to being in this middle in terms of my job kind of in life. I can't quite see what it is that I want my work to look like exactly. I've been really trying to think deeper into my why behind everything. And again, when I try to visualize it, it's hard because I think I can only see it from the perspective of all my past experiences. So it's limited, and nothing quite that I see right now is quite right, if that makes any sense, or is quite in alignment with what I'm feeling. That being said, I do think that it's going to be connected to a degree with dogs or animals in some way, shape, or form. Also, a little bit about what we had been talking about was this understanding that the world and things and people and animals around us are to a degree a reflection of ourselves. And I think one of the pieces that is very unique to dogs is that dogs are unlike really any other animal that exists in our life, because they literally live with us, eat with us, sleep in our beds. Like they live a life that is very different from pretty much all other animals. Cats maybe, but cats are, we know cats are special. Cats are not my specialty. I love them, but sometimes. But it's something that I think dogs are very in tune with in terms of our inner world. So I think that, quickly speaking in terms just of the science, so dogs' noses are 10,000 to 100 times stronger than our noses on average, and sometimes even more so. And I imagine that if they can smell changes in our pH levels, they can smell if somebody's about to have a seizure. They can smell if somebody's about to have a panic. They can smell these things. I imagine they perceive the world crazy different. So I would imagine they're also very in tune with our energy. So I think one of the pieces that will be connected with what I do later on is going to be this idea behind dogs being able to sense unresolved feelings and energies within ourselves, and then in turn acting out those things in ways that catch our attention, which are typically, oh, I don't want my dog to do blah, 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 blah. It makes me feel blah, 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 blah. And taking a look at that feeling that they're feeling, because I think that's kind of the purpose behind it to a degree, where we can learn from that feeling that we are feeling when our dogs do X, Y, and Z, and in turn change our inner state, which also in turn also changes how they're behaving. So I don't know exactly how that looks. I don't know how that looks, but it's just a feeling that I've had for a little while. So I think it's going to be something along those lines.
That makes sense. So you're leaving a lot up to interpretation for after.
Yep.
I think that's smart.
Yep.
So talking about interpretation and after, as you approach this date with Lena in this work, two-part question. What are you trying to leave behind? And what are you trying to gain or reclaim?
Yeah, I also really liked that question. It's a very good question. I think that I would really like to leave behind kind of this version of myself that I've lived thus far, and there's many wonderful attributes to, I think, who I am and who I've chosen to be. But I think there's so much more that I am capable of. I think humans are made to continually grow and change and shed old skins and continue, not just retire and sit around and watch TV. Not quite what I want to do. So I think I would really, in terms of a feeling, I think I'd really like to transform this feeling of not enoughness and kind of insecurity in doubting myself, and transform that into more of a feeling of knowing the essence of who I am, which again, that what you were talking about, the nothingness and everythingness that we all are, and those elemental feelings of peace and connection and all those things. Because again, if I'm able to be very centered and feeling connected and feeling that peace and feeling that love with everything like around me, then anything that I'm creating in my life or any people in my life, anything is going to be that much more, as opposed to coming from a place of fear and insecurity. Again, I've experienced a taste of that, and it's crazy. I don't know how to explain it very well, but you just know, and you just are, and you're able to do so much more than you've ever done in just tiny little periods of time. And then people in these situations that you can't even comprehend or imagine ever happening, like, are happening just regularly. It's the same thing as running into you at that conference. It's like, we're laughing about it, but it's like, it's one of those synchronicities that, especially when you're on that, like, that path, it's like, for lack of a better term, the universe, or whatever you want to label it as, like, those things just start happening regularly. So it's that just like magical experience that, again, it's just the only word, that just becomes normal. It just becomes normal. Like, we're having this conversation, I can pretty much guarantee probably 99% of like the rest of the world, they'd be like, what are you talking about? But that other small percentage of people are gonna be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, so I hope to be a little bit of a better version of myself, and leave behind some more fears and have a little bit more of the knowing.
Yeah, I think as abstract as these conversations may seem, sometimes really what it comes down to is the shedding of the veil.
Yep,
And
exactly, yeah.
exposing truth in who you are, your essence in terms of who you want to be, who you are as not just a person or identity, but as a consciousness.
Yes.
And I think that there are people that get it, and there are people that don't get it because they're oftentimes still so engrossed in their daily stresses.
Yep.
Their jobs, their lives, the bills they have to pay and whatnot. And they just see it day after day after day, and they define that as their life.
Yep.
But it is not their life, it's their life situation, to quote Eckhart Tolle again. But some people break out of it, some people don't. And I keep going back to this in my mind, but this whole concept, not just with you, but with other people that I've talked about, even myself, it's like the movie The Matrix. You spend your whole life, like Neo has always known that there is something different about this life, that there's something he can't put his finger on. And then all of a sudden, Morpheus runs into him, one day and offers him the red pill or the blue pill. And once you take the red pill, you go down that rabbit hole, but you can never, ever come back. And I truly believe that in real life, whatever that means, that this is as close as you can get to taking the red pill. And I think that it's going to be awesome. I'm really happy to be able to talk to you about this, today, and then talk to you again after.
Yeah.
After the fact. Just don't change your name. Don't call yourself
Let's change my name.
Seashell.
Did you want to change your name?
And then wear a toga, after that. No, side story. My friend Chad, and shout out to Chad Yarvitz. He did an ayahuasca journey up in Temecula. And he shows up to this compound where he's about to do journeys for 3 days. And he's greeted by the host named Seashell, who had hairy armpits. No. And he was like, this is going to be really great, I think. If this is any kind of indication. Anyway, I keep thinking about Seashell. Shout out to you, Chad. So as we kind of head towards the end of this, how do you want people to feel when they see the real Noelle beyond dog training after all of this?
Yeah. Also, like this, I liked all your questions. They're great. This one felt a little weird for me to like answer in terms of my instinctive, like, oh, I'm not worthy of, anything. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, it's okay. One of the things that I remember thinking, I'm just going to quickly say this story, as a kid in the church that I grew up in, they would have these particular days where they'd have like an open mic and anyone could go down to the front and speak and share what was on their hearts, is what they would say. And almost all of these people would say something to the extent of, oh, I was a terrible sinner, and then this whatever happened, and then I got saved. And I remember as a kid thinking, wow, like, I don't have anything that clear, like that black and white. Like, I don't have a situation. I was a kid, and I remember thinking these things. And I remember wanting to, not even wanting, I remember praying for and asking for situations in my life to just have a crazy cool life or whatever. I had no idea what I was asking for because I wanted a cool story. And in hindsight, looking back and reflecting on this question and the feeling that's kind of come up for me over the years, and also in connection with my work and this message of just being genuine that I want to get out to people and being open in, hey, I don't have it all figured out. Like right now, I'm not in the ideal place I want to be in, and I'm uncomfortable and I'm having these issues right now, as opposed to I have it all sorted out and I'm better on the other side. Here's how I did it. It's I'm uncomfortable right now. I don't like it. I don't know what I'm going to do about it. And I know it's going to be fine. And I think that is a stage that a lot of people are in. And a lot, like that is the stage that if we are actually dedicated towards growth and improvement, like that is the stage that we're probably pretty regularly in, because the whole metamorphosis, we're going to, go back into the cocoon and disintegrate everything and remake ourselves and over or add to ourselves, whatever. And so I think it's kind of a combined thing of I want to share kind of the journey as I'm on it so that people can feel hopefully not as alone in the moments where they are struggling, because I had a lot of those moments and I still continue to, where I have felt very, very alone and not wanting to be a hindrance to people, like reaching out. And so I think that by continuing to do this and as well as afterwards, I think that I would just like to be able to inspire people enough to actually want to do that inner work and work on themselves, because again, that other side, what is possible, is just so beautiful and wonderful. And I think everyone should be able to experience it, but everyone has to be able and willing to go and look within themselves. So I'm hoping that will be at least enough to, I don't know, even inspire one person a little bit to try to do that, because life is so much more than what we're, fed to believe it is.
Right. And I think that's beautifully put. I think that you covered a bunch of questions there, in terms of What are you excited about? What are you nervous about? What do you hope to get out of this? And how do you wish people to view you after all of this? So when we sit down for part 2, what do you hope that we're talking about at that point?
I don't even know. I don't even know. I think I'm trying not to have hardcore expectations or anything. I would really like to be at a place where a lot of the things that we've talked about have been happening, where it's just like I couldn't have imagined this is what we'd be talking about, or I couldn't have imagined, I don't know, how quickly things would happen, or that was totally different than anything I expected, like you said. So I don't know.
I think that's smart. That's profound to sort of save space for what may happen and what will happen, and just accept everything for what it is. That's all I have on my end.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I think I want to commend you and thank you for sitting down and chatting with me and trusting me, and also listening to my referral, to Lena. I think that this all makes sense to me, just sitting down, listening to your story. A couple things that I just wrote down is that all of this is about breaking patterns for you.
Yep.
It started off in childhood and seeing a pattern and recognizing that you didn't want to be a part of it. And then even your career, which I'm not psychoanalyzing you, but your career choices have reflections on everything that you've described in terms of recognizing patterns and trying to break those and trying to help people and working with children and working, for the deaf and sign language and then now with working with dogs too. There's parallels to everything.
Yeah.
So as you build these positive patterns, I see you trying to break the not negative patterns, but to make yourself better. And I think that this is going to be a wonderful experience, however it may pan out for you. And I do think that you and I will be talking about some stuff that we are not thinking of right now. So
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
Yeah. But with that said, I think it also, all of this shows exactly why you are so successful as a dog trainer, why you're such a great dog trainer. And people, you got to plug yourself too. People are looking. So where can people find you?
Basically Align Canine on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and YouTube. Go follow YouTube.
And I'll put the link in the show notes too.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. So thank you for your time, and I think this is going to be wonderful.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know you kind of mentioned a couple breadcrumbs throughout, but in terms of, I guess, after having finished this episode and everything, is there anything else in particular, or do you want to reaffirm anything specific that you said in terms of like what would be your advice for me going into this over, I guess, the next couple of weeks and then actually going into it? Anything like you want to like re-mention or tell me to focus on?
The same thing that I told you before, and it's the number one thing that I mentioned to anybody else that I've referred over to this, and even to myself, that you have got to surrender. Mm-hmm. You have got to give in. Even when you blast off on the past the handshake doses, or even the handshake dose, where you go in there and you get introduced to this whole other realm, you sit there and you go, what the hell is happening? What's happening? And then instead of, some people say, no, stop. Like, I don't want this.
Right.
At that point, you just have to recognize what that voice is and what is that fear. That fear, what is fear? What is it? If you truly define it, yeah, it's an emotion, it's a thought, it's a narrative, but all of that comes down to one thing. It's your ego trying to preserve itself. Its day of reckoning is coming. at least temporarily. So when you recognize that and you all of a sudden have this split from your thinking mind to your observing mind, you go, hey, that fear is not me. That's my ego screaming, please don't come for me. But you don't think of it that way as if it's like a rodent or some kind of thing you need to exterminate. You almost look at it and go, holy crap, you screaming, no, 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 stop, or I'm afraid of this. That's your inner child. You're just scared. And instead of saying, I'm going to obliterate you, you just say, it's okay to be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid. We're doing this for us. Like, I'm not here to hurt you.
Cool.
And then you let go. You've got to let go.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Makes a lot of sense.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you again, Noelle.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait till part 2.
Yeah. That was part 1 of my conversation with Noelle. What you just heard was someone at a threshold, a moment where the past no longer defines the future and the soul is preparing for something bigger. In part 2, you'll hear Noelle again, but it'll be a different version of her. That's the power of this work. The medicine journey she's about to take can unlock things that we didn't even know we were carrying. It can reshape our narratives, soften our armor, and illuminate paths that we never saw before. So stay tuned, and if you're new to this kind of conversation or feeling that same pull towards healing, self-discovery, or expanded consciousness, keep following. We're just getting started. You can follow Noelle on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Align Canine. You'll find her links and more in the show notes. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and check out the video version of this episode for a deeper connection. Noelle and I will see you on part 2.